Welcome to the post-game episode of The Independent after Notre Dame's 23-10 victory over Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Notre Dame was the tougher team. They were the more physical team. They were the more creative team. They were the better coach team. And ultimately, they're moving on to face Penn State in the Orange Bowl on January 9th. It was a wild scene, as you might imagine, a victory that was both 3 seasons in the making because of the head coach, Marcus Freeman, but also 31 years in the waiting, so to speak, for Notre Dame fans. A bowl streak that dated back to the 1993 season. That's over. And Tim, before we'll get into a bunch of questions, but Notre Dame couldn't have been more emphatic in how they went out and handled business tonight. It's I've been doing this for 24 years. I've never covered this game, not once.
And I've been watching this team my whole life. I'm 37 years old, Pete, and I've never I don't know if I've ever seen this game. We've had some moments. Certainly, when you think about the COVID season against Clemson is an all timer. If you want to go back to the Florida State game in '93, I was thinking about it, Pete, and I was on air when the game ended, and I was thinking, this is the biggest win since ... And, we've done this, right? You and I have done this. You've done it with your readers, your listeners. And it's always, maybe Oklahoma in 2012. Maybe, this is the biggest win since Florida State 1993.
Yeah.
Beating West Virginia in 1989 Fiesta Bowl. I mean, I'm being serious.
Yeah, it's a lifetime. There is a generation of Notre Dame fans who have literally never seen this other than on YouTube.
Yeah,
they'd never experienced it, and it was so cool to after the game. You get the press conferences, but the locker room's open, so I get in to go. You can talk to the coaches a little bit, and I walked down the tunnel. It's just me and Mike Denbrock, and he said he was just like, "Look, I am so happy for everybody." And the quote was, we've all endured all this. We don't belong, and you're not supposed to be here, and all that stuff. And we've had to deal with all those years to see those kids erase that, at least for the time being, and do the things. That was about all heart and toughness, regardless of the stage you've been on. We've been on. We've been true to who we are. I'm just so happy for everybody, and I think Denbrock was a perfect spokesman for that, because he's on his 3rd stint at Notre Dame. He has lived some of these games when Notre Dame literally did not belong on the same field as an SEC power or another national program. And so for him to be a part of that tonight and be able to talk to him about it afterwards was very cool, because it was just it was, to call it a program win is 5 magnitudes too short of what it was. Because it wasn't just the physicality part. I mean, think about how Marcus Freeman put this team together. Riley Leonard, RJ Oben, Bo Collins, Mitch Jeter, Jayden Harrison, I mentioned Rod Hurd, Jordan Clark, to go into the transfer portal and find guys who are willing to believe in what you believe in and come into your locker room. And I talked to Jack Kaiser about this afterwards. And it's you do that and I'm not going to be the man where, at my next stop. That's just not how it works. And to find a group of players who would be willing to do that is, to me, just incredible. Because it's not just about mentality and toughness. It's all about roster construction and being creative and selective in who you go after. And I thought that, the job that Freeman did is not just a game manager, an in-game coach, but as a CEO coach really showed tonight. He had both things working for you. And that's the bet on Marcus Freeman was, he can take Notre Dame to a place that it has not been in a long, long time. And tonight he did.
There's so many moments that we're going to think back. And obviously, this isn't a national championship. This is a quarterfinal win, and they've got to turn around and play in 7 days against Penn State. And obviously, Jeremiah Love's status is going to be a big concern moving forward. But, the Don Schuler fumble on 3rd and 1 from the 16, the dialing up that blitz, the execution, how he comes untouched, the hit as hard as it was. I mean, the fact that ETN had never lost a fumble in his collegiate career, and they have that big time play. And then, as you mentioned, all the listeners right now, and it's incredible to see all the people chiming in. And I'm sure you'll certainly get to those, Pete. But the fact that at the end of the first half, and I talked about it on my show tonight, and Kirby Smart's won 2 national championships. You could argue he's the best coach in the game right now. And I thought it was a mistake for him to get aggressive and for Notre Dame to make them pay for that, and let alone it be RJ Oben, a guy that so many Notre Dame fans have been just wondering, where is he? This was supposed to be an impact player, and there he is coming off the edge. His first sack as a Notre Dame player is the biggest play of the Sugar Bowl. And Junior Tuihalamaka, man, that dude, I don't know if it's just the hair, but that guy played his ass off tonight. And so many other players did too. But this defense, even when they, make some mistakes, they're still out there. They're kicking ass. Like, it was such a impressive way that they won this game, knowing that the offense wasn't, let's be honest, wasn't clicking. They couldn't really get a whole lot going. But, think about the most important drive of the game, Pete. And it's one where, and this is something that I love so much. And I sent you the clip because Kirk Cignetti, and, it's a podcast, so I'm a little fired up and I might curse. Kirk Cignetti talked all this shit about how he's tough and we're going to do this and his bravado. And then he goes out and coaches like he's scared, right? He punts at the 38-yard line. He plays for a field goal down 14-0. Marcus Freeman, I think you and your colleagues were very confident he would stay as aggressive as he has been.
And I was confident, but in some ways I was trying to talk myself into it. Like the stage was going to get bigger, but we were going to get the same Marcus Freeman.
And like fake punts, fake field goals, going for it on 4th down, all of these plays all year. It's like, all right, it's a little bit different though. You're 4th and 1 at the 20-yard line, and you pull out this play that is the most remarkable thing. I've never seen it happen before. You sprint off a team, you bring on the offense, and then you get them to jump, and the ball's on who's the center?
Pat Coogan.
Coogan, of course, the guy.
4 quarters of football.
And he has the wherewithal to snap it.
Yes.
And I'm thinking there watching the game, Pete, I'm like, oh my God, are they going to call offsides? Are they actually going to call this? Because if they don't call it, it's 23-10, and they've got the ball at the 20-yard line. And then they run off 3 more minutes. And you get the John Elway helicopter flip through the air by Riley Leonard. I mean, it's the most impressive scoreless drive I've ever seen in my life.
I wrote this in my post-game story. It's already up on The Athletic. Like 12 plays, 41 yards has never looked that good. I mean, they took, I want to say 7 minutes plus of game time off. And this was another thing. When I was talking to Denbrock by the team buses, I was like, what the hell was the fire drill at the end? Like, explain to me what that was. And he's like, we thought, he described, the quote was like, we thought Mr. Kirby, Mr. Timeout was going to call it. All they wanted Georgia to do was call a timeout. But the name of that concept, like to trigger it happening, is called Got 'em. And then Denbrock's like, and we did. And I was just like, oh my God, just like this, it was, it felt like the whole thing did feel a little Hollywood to me. Like after the fact, like after the game had already ended. But this even goes to, Marty Biaggi. You're trying to get Mitch Jeter through the slump of his lifetime. He drills 3 40-yard field goals. Yeah. You get the kickoff return that you haven't got all year, nothing even close to it, frankly. And you do it with the guys throwing the key blocks are like Leo Scheidler and Deion Colsey for Jayden Harrison and Max Hurleman. And Leo Scheidler is only in the game because Bo Collins is getting an IV on the sideline. And on top of that, I'm interviewing Biaggi. He's wearing like an old Notre Dame sort of Letterman's jacket, or not Letterman's jacket, but like an old Notre Dame jacket that is his dad's, Steven, who died 4 hours after the Indiana game.
Oh my God.
The night after his twins were born, a boy and a girl, one of them named Steven after his dad. And he's talking about, my dad would be so proud of us looking down, like he wanted to live long enough to see the first Notre Dame playoff win. He did that. Died at home in Louisville, surrounded by his family. And you're just like, holy crap! Like what? I mean, what a team! What a story! I mean, it's just an incredible moment. I mean, this has been such a fun team to cover anyway, and to sort of get this night to cover this game was, I mean, it was just incredible. The whole thing was incredible.
You know, one of the really key pivotal moments of the game, you think about end of the third quarter, 4th and 1 at midfield, and Notre Dame goes for it, which once again, sticking to his guns, and they don't get it. So close, you know, the spot I thought was probably right. It was right there. And, you know, you turn the ball over on downs. And then what does the defense do? They force a 4th down conversion, or 4th down attempt. And then you get the false start on Georgia. And I would say the one bone to pick today, Pete, was very uncharacteristic penalties. You know, you see the delay of game called on Kaiser, and we can get into the pass interference, the roughing the punter that was running into the punter, all of that. But then on 4th and 2, after it looks like at that point it's 20-10, right? And this is the point where I'm like, uh-oh, this is 4th and 2. You just messed up. They brought out the punt unit. You made a mistake. And then they dial up another blitz. And once again, Al Golden, Drake Bowen comes untouched. He delays for a little bit, then sneaks in there. And the pass, whether it was complete or not, was well short of the sticks. And I thought there were a couple moments tonight that were so pivotal, and that's one that may get overlooked a little bit. But after the mistake by Kaiser, it's 4th and 2. They bring the offense back out, and you dial up a beautiful blitz, and you force Gunner Stockton to dirt it, and Notre Dame takes over at the end of the third quarter there.
Yeah, and I thought that, you know, this gets back to the aggression, right? Like, I knew Marcus Freeman was going to go for it at midfield. I knew it was going to be a Riley Leonard run. I knew they were going to motion somebody in the backfield, and they did. They got stopped. And I talked to Al Golden outside the locker room about this afterwards. And here's the quote. First thing I said to Marcus on the headset was, "We got your back." And I think we went 4 and out immediately. That's really important. Marcus has got to be able to call a game like that. That was as big as any moment in the game, I'm pretty sure. If they go down and score there, maybe a different outcome. And he's dead on about it. Like that, the sort of, you won't find a more complimentary performance than what Notre Dame showed tonight. You know, kind of coaches talk about all 3 phases all the time, and usually they hit on 2. Sometimes they hit on 1. And to get scoring from special teams and offense, frankly, more special teams than offense, and to have the defense shut down Georgia the way that it did. Georgia could not run the ball at all. You know, one of my biggest concerns going into the game was like, will Georgia be able to wear down Notre Dame? I thought Notre Dame had to have a lead in the third quarter to win, because Georgia would wear them down in the run game otherwise. They got a lead, and they were able to stop Georgia from having the opportunity to even try to wear them down. So it was all 3 phases I thought were phenomenal tonight. It was as well coached a performance as I think I don't know the last time I came away from a Notre Dame game thinking like, wow, that was a plus coaching performance to that level as it was tonight.
Yeah. And I was, you know, as great as Marcus has been this year, you're going up against a 2-time national champion winning coach. And I thought, all right, well, probably edge to Kirby Smart. And I thought Marcus won that battle. He pulled, as he has done during this 11-game winning streak. He's really kind of pulled the right strings. I know a bunch of people are chiming in. So, Pete, injury updates, Jeremiah Love and Howard Cross. Were you able to catch up with either one of them?
So Jeremiah Love had a hard brace on his knee. I think it was his right knee. Walking off the field, Mike Denbrock was talking to him. Love seemed to indicate he'd be ready to go. We'll see. Howard Cross, I talked to him in the locker room post-game. He said, I'm fine with the ankle. I believe he came back in the game. I was coming down to the field at that point, so I didn't really have much of a view. And then, like, also notable, Cooper Flanagan had a kind of a walking boot on one of his feet when he was leaving the field on crutches. So they definitely came out of this banged up.
Yeah.
I think that is sort of the nature of college football these days. It's like it's the test of attrition. And I think Notre Dame sort of came through that hurting. It was an incredibly physical game, and they came out the other side of it. But yeah, it's I do think that as how Jeremiah Love comes through will be critical, because that he is the difference making player that Notre Dame has got to have, I think, to beat Penn State. As much as they got through tonight really without him at his best, the 1-2 punch of Price and Love is critical to go with Leonard the rusher. So yeah, that's definitely part of it. And Cross being solid is even more critical with Riley Mills already out. So all of that stuff means a lot.
One other thing that I kind of picked up on in this game, and I noticed it in the Indiana game, was you're starting to see, and because he's healthy, Jordan Faison is the go-to receiver right now.
Yeah.
For Riley. And, it's funny because as it brings it back to gambling, Pete, as I am one to do, I pulled out my app this morning and I was like, man, Jordan Faison, 29.5 receiving yards. And I'm like, I just think back to the Indiana game, and I'm thinking about players that can make people miss. And Notre Dame, let's be honest, doesn't really have anyone out wide that does that except Faison. He's super twitchy. And as the game wore on, it felt like, okay, that's the guy they want to get the ball to in space. And you saw, was it the second drive, Pete, that they just did that quick rollout, throw it to Faison, and they picked up like 6-7 yards. So it's clear to me, outside of, the three-headed monster in the backfield, that their next go-to guy is Jordan Faison.
Yeah, I think that's clear now. Maybe even above Bo Collins. And I remember, I think I was asking Mike Denbrock about this last week, and it was just like, hey, look, this is the guy that we saw in August. Like, when I keep talking up Jordan Faison, this is the reason why. So yeah, I think that's critical, because this is not a overly deep or talented wide receiver room. There are games where they haven't been productive. Tonight was one of the nights where they were just productive enough. There was very little downfield passing game. I don't know how many passes Riley Leonard even attempted beyond 10 yards. I know he completed one in the first half, but not much. Not much.
It felt a lot to me like it was the Texas A&M kind of game.
Oh, yeah.
Plan, which was like, okay, we're not going to be able to create a lot of separation out wide. And this is, realistically speaking, Pete, this year where Notre Dame has seen the opposition be similar or maybe even slightly more talented than them, it's A&M, and it's tonight against Georgia. And they had a very similar game plan. It was like, all right, let's not get crazy. Let's make some safe throws. And look, the turnovers won the game for Notre Dame. I mean, you force a fumble inside the red zone on ETN. You force the fumble on Stockton at the end of the first half. Obviously, the kickoff return was enormous at the start of the second half. I mean, there's no denying that.
A little bit.
But to be +2 in turnover margin, to not turn the ball over, even though, you don't get it a fourth down. But what happens in the next possession? Your defense steps up. And, another thing that I think needs to be brought up too, another transfer, was after the Kaiser pass interference on fourth down, which I know a lot of Notre Dame fans were not happy about. They forced another fourth down, and who was it in the corner of the end zone? Rod Hurd.
Exactly.
Making the play in the corner. I mean, the defense was just phenomenal tonight, and I really thought, and you talked about it on your podcast and wrote about it, and I certainly discussed it to you. I kind of thought the loss of Riley Mills might be just a bridge too far.
Yes.
And
I feel like we could have copyrighted Bridge Too Far for obvious shirts, I think.
Right. At least for one game, man. And I don't know if it's the Ewing theory or whatnot, but for one game, this defense rose to the damn occasion, and they were incredible. Say what you will about the offense, but the whole Georgia, I don't care if it's Gunner Stockton or whatever. Look, Gunner Stockton was a 4-star recruit, same class as Drew Aller, same class as Cade Klubnik, was in this offense for 3 years. And, people thought that this would be an upgrade over Carson Beck. Now, I never subscribed to that, but to hold them under 300 yards and really one massive explosive play, that 66-yarder to Arian Smith. But outside of that, by the way, how's that walk-on feeling right now?
Yeah. By the way, Georgia finished 29 rushing attempts, 62 yards. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And it was, this gets into like being aggressive though, right? Like I talked to, the equivalent of running a fake punt on defense, or the equivalent of going for it 4th down on offense, but on defense, is the amount of man-to-man coverage Notre Dame plays. And I found Rod Hurd in the locker room and asked him about that play. And he's like, look, he's like, we're running man-to-man with Al Golden. Like, it's like, then you just got to go out there and do it. And in every facet tonight, they went out there and they friggin' did it. So that was very cool. I'm trying to think about like what else stood out to me. RJ Oben, get back to him. Like, I talked to him in the locker room too. He got a game ball tonight.
Good for him, man. Good for him.
And it's like RJ Oben was somebody who you felt like, what was the point of this? Hadn't done really anything. And in some ways had felt like a value detraction from what Notre Dame was doing defensively. We all want to see more Bryce Young, and when Boubacar Traore and Jordan Botelho get hurt, like, that's the end of the pass rush. And like tonight, you get RJ Oben and Junior Tuihalamaka with sacks. Like, nobody could have seen that coming. I joked up in the press box, like, on what page of the scouting report of Notre Dame would you find RJ Oben and Junior Tuihalamaka? Like, where would they be? Did they even know who they were? I don't know. So that is sort of like that all hands on deck vibe that Notre Dame had tonight. Yeah, it's Adon Schuler leads the team with 8. Like, how often would you have your 2 safeties be your tackle leaders and it being a good thing? But Adon Schuler with 8, Xavier Watts with 7. They led the team in tackles tonight. Sacks, Kaiser had 1. Donovan Heinisch had 1. RJ Oben. And then, Tuihalamaka's got in there too with, I only credit him with a half sack, but certainly played a hell of a lot bigger than that. So it was shocking to me how many people had a hand in this tonight, because it literally felt like everybody.
Coach Humph on the comments says, win or lose, ND will miss Riley Mills. Yeah, of course. I wasn't trying to say that they're not going to miss him, and maybe they'll miss him massively. look, Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton are absolute monsters that they're going to have to turn their attention to. A bunch of people are asking Pete about Thursday night and the promoting of the game, and knowing that the NFL has a game on Saturday night, I believe on ABC, ESPN. I don't think there's any way this game is getting changed, right?
No, I don't think so. I have not heard any official talk of that. I would think Notre Dame would sort of look at it as, okay, we're playing Saturday to Saturday, and the opponent we're playing had a game on Thursday, the week before.
Right.
So they get extra time. Like that happens all the time in college football. Usually it's not in the postseason, where you want things to be a little bit more equitable. But I do think that's like, look, this is the reasons behind this are way more important than the college football playoff. And so I do think you kind of have to roll with it as is. We saw like how difficult it was to move a game. I don't know how many people ended up not coming to the game. There were some questions about.
How was the atmosphere in there?
Yeah, it was really good. It was good. It was definitely more Georgia, probably 2-1 Georgia. Maybe it was 80% full. 85% full. I think they announced the attendance, but I of course did not jot down in the middle of everything else going on. But it was a sellout, but it was not at capacity tonight for obvious reasons. Like, a lot of people had to pick up and leave. But I thought the atmosphere was incredible. And it's like, you brought up Adon Schuler, and like Pat Sobolowski asked us, speaking of Schuler, what a study is. And it speaks to the recruiting of Mike Mickens. He looks like the Terminator out there. It's amazing what a defense can look like when everyone knows what they're doing all the time. Yeah. And that's like you see Notre Dame, they tackle really well, which to me is a coaching. So they don't bust coverages. Like when Bell got deep and dropped it, he turned Xavier Watts the wrong way. That was good scheme. When was it Cash Jones?
Jones, 32-yarder. Yeah.
Like that was great scheme. That wasn't like Georgia having better players suddenly. So I give, it's not. Georgia also has a well-paid coaching staff.
Yeah.
They also did some good things tonight. They also have good players, but not enough to make it closer than 23-10. So I would, just to sort of circle back, this is kind of an interesting question from Coolman's 94. Like, in your opinion, if Carson Beck wasn't hurt, do you think he would have made a difference in the score? I certainly think he would have made a difference. Because he would have been the best quarterback Notre Dame had faced all season. Tyler Shuck and Jayden Maiava played incredibly well against Notre Dame. Beck was more talented than either of them. That's not to say he would have thrown for 300 yards and 5 touchdowns, but certainly would have stressed Notre Dame in different ways. But like, would Notre Dame have held Georgia to less than 2.1 yards per carry if Riley Mills played? I mean, it's impossible to know. And you just have to sort of give Notre Dame credit for going out there and whipping Georgia in the trenches as much as they did when they were down. Georgia took some shots. And Al Golden told me after the game, like he was at breakfast with Mike Mickens on Thursday before the game, and I just gave Mickens a reminder, like, look, not that we're going to let them take deep shots, but there will come times in this game where Georgia is able to hit deep shots, take deep shots. They only hit one.
They dropped one.
They definitely dropped one.
But I'll say this, Pete, like for people looking to poke holes, it was the same drive, right?
That Dylan guy Bell dropped everything. Dominique Bell dropped a ton of stuff tonight. I mean, right. They do not have a well-coached wide receiver room in terms of if drops are on your coaching staff because you haven't coached out of them, like Georgia doesn't have a well-coached wide receiver room.
Well, and that was the thing that they brought up on the broadcast, and McElroy was discussing, and they quickly threw up the graphic of how many drops they've had this year. Was the 36th drop of the season. And they were like, well, Dylan Bell isn't usually the one dropping it. It's the other guys, So
he had multiples.
Yeah. So it was like 36 drops. Yeah. I made sure I noted that on the broadcast. And speaking of 30s, 31 takeaways this year, Pete. Yeah. I mean, there's part of me, there's part that believes that turnovers are lucky and, it tends to even itself out. And I'm at the point where I'm like, I don't think there's any luck about it. This team is going after the ball. I mean, and I go back to the Adon Schuler hit, man. He just smacked Etienne. Just
put his helmet right on the football. Like you could not coach that any better. I think turnovers some of it is scheme and how aggressive you want to be. I get that. But some of it is just coaching your players to strike the ball exactly where it is it's ball disruption. It's not just like, I mean, I guess Navy just gave the ball away, but tonight, like Notre Dame took it away from Georgia. There were no gifts given to Notre Dame by Georgia, other than I guess Dominique Bell's drop. But the rest of it was just like Notre Dame went out and took it away.
Yeah, and it's funny because I know you were up in the press box. So I don't know if you caught any of this, but the two interactions from Kirby Smart from, I think it was Laura Rutledge, I believe, on their sideline, which was, he basically was like, yeah, we tried to be aggressive in the 2-minute and we made a mistake. And then they interviewed him right after the third quarter when they didn't get the fourth down. And I forget what the question was that Rutledge asked, but it essentially was like, how can you get back in the game? And he goes, well, you could get it on 4th and 2. So he was frustrated, man. Like he was not happy. And, going back, I just wrote a bunch of notes down, and once again, like it felt like late in the first half, McElroy was really critical of the sack that Riley Leonard took. And then the next play, Leonard, he loses 11 yards and then he gains 9 yards back on the next play. And it, once again, I'm not trying to overlook, it was a mistake by Riley Leonard, but he was able to pick it up. And then look, Mitch Jeter, he was an unsung hero tonight. All of his kicks, I think, until the last were touchbacks, which they haven't had for a while, and drilled. I mean, all 3 of those kicks were pretty much no doubters. They were drilled.
Yeah, it was. I was down on the field before the game watching him warm up. He hit a 47-yarder, which is not his most forceful kick, and then I saw him make a 52-yarder that actually bounced in off the crossbar. So it didn't feel like he didn't have the driver working necessarily on the range before the round. And then he had the driver working once he got on the course. So well played to Mitch Jeter tonight, because that God, I mean, we have been understandably tough on him because that part of Notre Dame's game felt like it was going to cost them in a huge moment. And instead, it made the difference tonight. Like, if Mitch Jeter is 0 for 3, like, I'm not sure Notre Dame wins the game.
It's funny because when we were previewing the Indiana game, I think my prediction, I did my math wrong, but I jokingly said he'll make a field goal, but he'll miss an extra point because, we were all at the USC game and he had a 23-yarder dead on and missed it. And you're like, well, this is done. And he's now, even the Indiana game, after he made the field goal, then he gets the one blocked and you're like, oh, here we go. Can't trust him. And tonight, all 3, just perfection, just right down. And, give him a ton of credit, man. Like, I know kicking is kind of like putting, right? You kind of hit on it. And it's like, if you get in your head, you're going to be in trouble. Hell, not to bring this to me on a very low level, but I was a terrible free throw shooter because it was all up here. It's all in your head. And for a kicker, it's all in your head. And he was able to overcome that. And they even mentioned that on the broadcast, kind of like how much this has meant to him. They showed his family up there in the stands. It was pretty cool to see, his field goals. And he's an emotional dude. I don't know if you've talked to him before, Pete, but he's emotional, man. He gets fired up.
He is not when we talk to him. Like, you would think he's on like the debate team. Like, he's very cool about it. Doesn't really give a whole lot away. It was funny. Like, yeah, I'll save the golf story for another time. But like, he's just somebody that like doesn't really give you much. And you would think that for how emotional he is on the field, like especially right before halftime against Indiana, that really poured out of him. And I didn't get much of a view of his reactions tonight, but I'm assuming it was equally strident in terms of how he had come across. That all was a huge part of it. I don't want to get into Penn State too much. And actually, before we do that, I will take care of some business here on the Independent. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Roback. You can go to roback.com and use the promo code Irish. I met actually an executive from Roback walking on the street in New Orleans today. Said he loved the podcast. Was wearing Roback officially licensed Notre Dame gear, which you can go to roback.com and get for 20% off if you use the promo code Irish.
And I saw someone in the Circa Sportsbook on New Year's Day wearing a Notre Dame Roback quarter zip.
I love it. That was the one that I saw today on the street from the executive. Also, shout out to Independent Shirts. You can go to independentshirts.com, search for the Independent. Or I'm sorry, obviousshirts.com. Search for the Independent. That's obviousshirts.com. You can get your 4 quarters of what football. We still haven't got the violence one in there, but like maybe after today, we can do that.
Well, there's another. I think Coogan brought out another phrase. What was it? God, country, and something.
Yeah, MF something. Notre Dame. I was right by that. This is how they broke the pregame huddle, and then we can talk about the offensive line. They broke the huddle with, okay, F on 3, 1, 2, 3, F. Like that was obviously they used more than the letter. But it was something to watch. And like for how much this game was about, I mean, it was about a million things, but like one of the big things was like the guys who came in, right? Hurd, Collins, Leonard, Oben, Clark, Jeter. But it was also about the guys who have been here the whole time. Coogan, Spindler, Wagner. I guess Anthony Knapp hasn't been here the whole time. Schrouth. And to to put the game on the offensive line's back, I mean, sort of going back to the 12-play, 41-yard drive that was like you can hang it in the Louvre, even though it ended in the punt. Like that's something I didn't think Notre Dame was going to be able to get that with their offensive line this year. Like I was very skeptical that group could deliver in that kind of spot against that kind of opponent. And I got to give them a lot of credit because they came up huge in that fourth quarter. They really left Georgia with nothing by the time James Rendell punted that away.
Shouts to James Rendell. I thought he had maybe his best game as a Notre Dame punter too. Yeah. Like everything seemed to be clicking. And obviously Georgia fans, and I think they had the right to gripe regarding the Bryce Young. That was definitely roughing the kicker. But their punter making his debut it was not discussed enough because he was not very good. And they were missing an All-American punter. And, you want to win all phases. And there's no denying that Marty Biaggi, this was his crowning moment with the running the punt team off the field in the fourth quarter to get the offsides ultimately, Rendell, Mitch Jeter, the kickoff return. It was a perfect storm of special teams for Notre Dame today. And it shouldn't go underlooked. Like they were fantastic. As someone says, James Rendell, underrated. Maybe we've gotten to it. There's been never a punter talked about more in Notre Dame history, maybe because of his looks preseason, but the dude was good today, man. He was really good.
Yeah, there was he's come full circle. He was overrated, then terrible, now underrated and good. Pretty impressive night. Yeah, why don't we get more, like a little bit more Riley Leonard color, because it was a game. His stats tonight, and there was a time in the game where I was just like, are they going to use him the right way?
90
the way they should
yards
use him?
passing.
Yeah. 15 of 24, 90 yards passing, took one sack, threw one touchdown, 14 carries, 80 yards rushing, no touchdowns, long of 32, but finished with 80. There were moments where it felt like the entire offense was built out of Riley Leonard. I normally don't have a problem with that. And this was sort of like by any means necessary. One of those means being Riley Leonard's sort of head over heels dive, which takes me back to something Riley Leonard said to me last week when I asked him, have they told you to stop jumping yet? And he's like, yeah, they kind of gave that up. I think the phrase he used was, it's a lost cause. And I was texting with one of Riley Leonard's youth coaches during the game, beginning of the third quarter. And we both texted each other, it's time for some quarterback designed run, like at the same time. Because that's when, even though they sort of stayed away from it a little bit in the first half, there was like the big run. I felt like they kind of had to lean on what Leonard could do and not worry about what he couldn't, which like tonight, not a lot of vertical pass game. And while I sit and Tim, it's like, you might disagree with this, like part of me is like, well, they got to open that up at some point if they want to keep going. I don't know if the Orange Bowl is the time that they actually do need to open that up.
No, I mean, it's funny because I was on air tonight on VSiN and, the line comes out, Notre Dame's a 1.5 point favorite. The total was 47. And I'm like, man, I got to play under. Like they're very similar teams to me, Notre Dame and Penn State. And it feels like it's going to be another brawl. And it's worth noting, there were a couple moments where it felt like Georgia was getting the best of the offensive line.
Yeah.
But, that's the best defensive line Notre Dame probably will face the rest of the year. Maybe Ohio State, but
I would say definitely Ohio State. Ohio State has, I think, just as many dudes as Georgia
and
does.
I would say this: the linebackers for Ohio State are monsters. Like
Yeah,
if that comes about, like Jack Sawyer, it's funny. My son's name is Sawyer. I'm like, oh, you're mentioned again. You're mentioned again. I mean, that dude's everywhere. But they figured it out. It wasn't pretty, but once again, going back to kind of the Texas A&M thing, they just figured out what you needed to do to get this victory. And ultimately it was, let's run Riley Leonard more regularly. And, his over under was 42.5 rushing yards. And I'm kind of kicking myself. I'm like, man, that was an easy play, right? Because you had to know that the aerial assault probably wasn't going to be there tonight.
Yeah, and that Danny Leahy from the chat mentions Notre Dame consistently stayed ahead of the chains in the second half. Very underappreciated. I would agree, and I think in some ways they didn't always stay ahead of the chains, but they didn't fall behind them, if that makes sense. Like they didn't get to a lot of 2nd and 5s, but they didn't have a lot of 2nd and 10s. It was a lot of 2nd and 7s, and I thought that the offense, the play calling was conservative, and Mike Denbrock joked that he set back offensive football 15 years tonight. He called the game that he wanted to do. And like, man, that I think back to College Station, and one of my biggest takeaways from that night was like Mike Denbrock called the game he had to call, not the game he wanted to call.
Mm-hmm.
Tonight was he called the game he had to call, not the game he wanted to call. And, maybe it's not quite the same thing because it was like it was the game he wanted to call, but like maybe it's not what the game plan he would put together in June in his office.
Well, and the chat's pointing it out. It's worth noting, 1 tackle for loss for Georgia all night.
That's shocking.
That shocks me too. But I mean, and that's kind of a credit. Does that include? I mean, so there was the sack. Is that the only one that was a tackle for loss?
I'm scrolling through the stats right now, and because that's sort of what I'm talking about a little bit in terms of, they were credited for 1 tackle for loss, and it was the sack.
Man, that's
where it's like you're not getting ahead of the chains all the time, but you're not falling behind them either, and like that's a distinction with a difference. So yeah, it's like when you can get to a lot of 2nd and 7s, and then maybe you can run the quarterback a little bit, or you can throw it to Mitchell Evans, or you can work it to Jordan Faison. That was I think a real key. And again, like if you're going to play that way, everyone has to contribute, and like that is one of they were able to play that way despite. I'm pulling up their penalties right now.
10 penalties.
10 penalties. You would think like Riley Leonard throws for 100 yards, and you have 10 penalties. Like I don't know if it's going to work out. But that's one of the reasons this game took everyone and everything to win. And they did.
One of the, and we've talked about so much, but regarding Riley Leonard, right? So they hold him on the field goal, early second quarter, helped out by the sideline penalty there. And the defense does a good job. After the 66-yarder, it's a 1-yard run, incompletion, or it's a 2-yard run, 1-yard run, and an incompletion to force the field goal. And then the offense had done nothing. And what do you get on that drive? That's when you get the 32-yard run from Riley Leonard. So Notre Dame did a really good job in a pretty critical moment of responding. Down 3-0. They stop. They give up the explosive play, the most explosive play outside of the kickoff return in the game, 66-yard reception to Smith. And then after that, Notre Dame, they respond. They get the big run from Riley Leonard. It almost felt like that was the point, Pete, where Denbrock was like, okay, let's just run Riley Leonard a lot tonight. It was like, okay, this is what we're going to have to do. And it was a really creative, I thought, run. And he, snuck his way through, and he kept going for 32 yards and ultimately sets up, once again, to your point about Mitch Jeter, an important spot. Mitch Jeter nails a 44-yarder, and you're back to, all right, we're tied, 8:20 to go in the second quarter.
Yeah, it's because the 32-yard run I thought was like I don't know if it was a check or an audible. but it was right into sort of the gap in the defense. Like it was either the perfect call or the right time or the perfect read at the right time by Riley Leonard. And I do like this was something I got into on Twitter during the game with some people about, running fourth down out of shotgun. People want under center, which like only gives you the A gap or the A gap. Whereas if you're in shotgun, you can sort of scan the field and figure out where you want to go. Like, where do you stand on shotgun fourth down sneaks?
I don't love them.
Okay.
especially when there's a Georgia defender in the backfield immediately.
Yeah.
Now, and I know you'll talk more about Penn State later, but Notre Dame's obviously got concerns regarding Jeremiah Love. The best pro prospect for Penn State, his status very up in the air with Abdul Carter.
Right.
So, everybody's banged up. I think the chat said it, as well. Like Penn State's nicked up too. And that's true, man. It is a battle of attrition. And once again, kind of going to the roster construction by Freeman, by Bowman, by the evaluations that these coaches have made, to step in with Leonard Moore when Benjamin Morrison goes out, to have RJ Oben, who is non-existent all year, make one of the biggest plays of the season, to have Junior Tuihalamaka play the way that he did, look, I remember when Jayden Harrison signed for Notre Dame. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, dude from Marshall? Like, what are we doing here? And, he stepped up a couple times. He had a touchdown reception, I forget, middle of the season at some point. And then this is why he's on the team. He's an All-American kick returner. You don't get a ton of options or opportunities in college football, and he made the best of it today.
Yep.
So it's like everything, it was like the culmination of a roster construction today by this coaching staff.
Yeah. It really was. It's like, I know where people saw Brian Kelly's a CE coach as a pejorative. Like Marcus Freeman did the CEO, like he was the CEO and worked in the mailroom. Like he did the whole thing tonight in terms of getting the team ready. I mean, we haven't even talked about what it was like down here with the tragedy on Bourbon Street that delays the game by a day. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily like Notre Dame had a masterful handling of it. I think everyone just sort of did the best that they could. But it was definitely a weird dynamic that Marcus and Kirby Smart had to deal with. And it sort of gets into like this question from Conman 12489. Any word on the team schedule for this week? Need dudes healthy for South Beach. Notre Dame, they fly to Miami or Miami/Fort Lauderdale on Monday. I actually booked my flight with about 45 seconds to go in the game tonight. For the game on Thursday night. So it's like, it is a real quick turnaround and to the point of the scheduling. And like, I think some people were like, well, why are they playing this game at 3:00 local? It was so whoever won could get back to their campus to get ready for the next game, because they were already behind on it. But yeah, that's Notre Dame will fly down. They'll be back in South Bend tonight, certainly as you're listening to this, unless you're on the live stream. And then they can meet on Friday. They don't lose all of Friday, as they probably would have if they were getting back at 4 a.m, right? So they'll be on adrenaline and wired and all that stuff, and that's great. But they can have a productive work day on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, fly to Florida on Monday for the game on Thursday. That's how the schedule will work for this week.
Juan on the comments said, could you tell if KVA was playing hurt or was he ramped back up? He wasn't on the 2 deep, so I was surprised to see him get meaningful snaps tonight. Can we expect him to be more involved versus Penn State?
Yeah, so KVA was involved in like third down packages tonight. That was about it. I got a tip of that before the game. So how much he played or didn't play wasn't really a surprise. I don't know if he'll be more involved. It's one of the few positions where they actually don't really need him to be a whole lot more involved. Snead was phenomenal. Bowen played well. Kaiser was great. I mean, Osbury, I think, is a stud. It would be great to have KV as well, though. So he's sort of on the mend, but how much he played tonight was expected. It wasn't like he had a setback when he got to New Orleans with the team. So maybe he'll be a little bit more than third down moving forward, but I'm not necessarily certain.
I have a random question
Yeah.
because I am planning on being at the game on Thursday. And I'm just curious, outside of the Notre Dame home game against Indiana, what do you think the game Notre Dame fans were targeting? Was it New Year's Day in New Orleans? Was it this Orange Bowl game? Or is it the ultimate wishful thinking of being in Atlanta on January 20th? I kind of feel like it. I don't know. I could be crazy, but the game I targeted was this Penn State game in the Orange Bowl. So, yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious what the fans will be like, because I mean, there's a fair share of Florida Notre Dame fans for sure, and the fact that it's Penn State. Look, I went to both Penn State games when they had the home and home in 06 and 07. So this will be 3 for 3 for me.
Where are you now, Anthony Morelli piece on the Athletic? I think that Notre Dame fans, in a weird way, are probably more into the Penn State game because of the animosity between the programs. Like, I talked to some Notre Dame fans about this game, like the Orange Bowl, if Notre Dame won, and it was just like, oh, we're gonna crush Penn State. And I'm like, I mean, they're pretty good. Like, they do some good things. But the vibe around Penn State, and I think the animosity between the fan bases is real. And I think, Florida, like South Beach and Florida and all that stuff, that's a lot more like the Notre Dame fan base's home turf than New Orleans. Like, there's not a lot about New Orleans. You think, yes, there's a lot of Notre Dame stuff down here.
By the way, I was just trying to see if my dog named after Manti wanted to come in for a moment, but he is
he's good. Okay.
He's good. Yeah, he
yeah.
Sorry, I'm in my office. I heard him at the door. I know some people are wondering, like, where do you go?
No, Manti comes first. Yeah, I do think, like, this is a game, and I know I feel like every fan I talked to was coming to the Indiana game.
Yeah.
And then there was a section where, like, I don't know about New Orleans, but definitely Miami. And so I do think there will be I think that the crowd for that game is going to be awesome. Like, it was good tonight. It was probably, like I said earlier, it's 2-1 Georgia. The crowd for a Notre Dame Penn State Orange Bowl. Yeah, I mean, think about the new narratives, right? The narratives that, now Notre Dame is like, check off the 31-year losing streak. You go to Miami, which has been a complete house of horrors for you.
Yeah.
Against Penn State and James Franklin, who cannot win a big game to save his life. Because no, I am not going to count Boise State or SMU as that. Neither, like, I think Indiana probably would have beat one, if not both of those teams. So
not if Cignetti's punting from the 38.
Yeah, I mean, regular season Cignetti probably would have won those games. Postseason Cignetti would have, like, turtled up in the corner. So I do think that there's going to be probably some desperation around Penn State. I think the vibes of that. You mentioned their start. Is it Abdul Carter? Is that their
Abdul
star
Carter,
defensive end who messed up his hand or something in the Fiesta Bowl against Boise State? Like, that was I think the environment for that is going to be crazy. Never mind Al Golden, former Miami head coach, going back to Miami to face his alma mater in Penn State.
Well, and I think Penn State fans, and Matt's not here, and we're hopefully Matt gets better. I know he's a little under weather, but
by the way, Matt's lack of appearance has nothing to do with the fact that he picked Georgia.
I picked Georgia too. Okay. Oh, by the way, I did. I picked Georgia. I was wrong. I had the under too, so I went 1-1.
Hopefully, maybe this can signal a statute of limitations on my Iowa State pick from 5 years ago, because I picked Notre Dame to beat Georgia. I'm just like, I'll leave that up to the listeners.
This is much better than that. I was wrong. It was funny because I opened my show tonight. I was solo, and then my co-host came on. I go, I know what he's going to do. I know he's going to give me crap for picking, because I am, as you can see from my text messages, I'm generally pessimistic, but I felt like this was a spot. And you've said it a million times, and whatever game it was, you've always said, if not now, when. And I know you retweeted the Booger McFarland, thing. As someone says, was it an emotional hedge? A little bit. I've never been happier. I've never been happier in my life to lose a bet. I have never been happier in my life to lose a bet. I was sitting there in the sports book by myself, and there were a couple, slams on the table, a little couple, I thought all in all I was pretty calm. But yeah, I mean, I think for Penn State fans, what I was getting to is I think they've been rather disappointed, obviously, with their draw, right? Where they play SMU at home, and then they play Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl.
You think disappointed?
No, I think the fans, from a geeked up standpoint, what I'm saying? I think they want to be, what I'm saying? I guess that came out poorly. I think this is where they're going to show up, is what I'm trying to get to, is they're going to be here. Notre Dame fans are going to be here. I think the atmosphere is going to be incredible, incredible on Thursday night.
Yeah, this will be, I think tickets for this was kind of outside of the norm because of what happened down here in New Orleans, but I think this maybe I shouldn't say that, because Texas Ohio State
in Arlington. I mean, think about it. By the way, think about this from if you're just a sports fan. Here's your weekend next weekend: Notre Dame, Penn State Thursday night, Ohio State, Texas Friday night, doubleheader of wild card weekend Saturday, triple header on Sunday, Monday Night Football. Not bad.
No, it doesn't suck. Doesn't suck as a football weekend.
And I think ESPN and ABC are pretty happy with the 4 brands that are going to be showing up in the college football playoff semifinals.
Usually Matt and I will talk more big picture stuff, because often we've been discussing it after Notre Dame 49, Army -2. But the college football playoff as a 12-team experiment, for how much the people broadcasting it seemed to hate it in the first round because the games weren't good. It feels perfect. You've got the SEC represented, you've got the Big Ten represented, you've got Notre Dame representative. In some ways, I think it would be better if Oregon had beaten Ohio State, because then you'd also have some geography diversity represented. But the teams that are still alive, you're going to have a black coach coaching for a national championship, I think for the first time, if I'm not mistaken. The Ohio State narrative, coming back from where they were, Notre Dame's inability to win the big game, they do it. James Franklin and Penn State, same thing. Texas and the SEC, as the lone survivor of that conference now that Georgia has been kicked to the curb. I don't think that you could ask for more. And I know that people are still ticked about the seedings and all that, and who got the buys. And I do think it's interesting that the 4 teams that got a buys all lost. But it feels like the college football playoff, the hope was this is going to be great for the sport. It's going to rejuvenate interest. I don't know if you could ask for a whole lot better than what you got if you're the people who run college football.
No, I think it was remarkable for the sport. Think about it this way. Well, I guess in the old format, Boise State and Arizona State wouldn't have gotten in, but the top 4 seeds all lost. And this has been a pretty chalky sport. And I thought today was a good game. I just thought the level of intensity, yes, it wasn't beautiful from an offensive standpoint, but I thought today was good. Arizona State and Texas was just batshit crazy. And, I just, and, Ohio State, I think it was entertaining in the sense of, oh my God, when this team is on, ain't nobody beating them.
Yeah. Yeah. That I think if there was a negative to this week for Notre Dame, Jeremiah Smith was it. Because you were just like,
That
oh,
dude is something, man.
we had been talking to ourselves. There's no super team. Everyone has imperfection. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see that. I agree. I'm on board with this. And then you flip on the Rose Bowl, and you're like, what the hell is this? Like, I was told this didn't exist this year. Like, talent was supposed to be spread around. Like, this is garbage.
Will Howard is throwing dimes to Emeka Egbuka. I'm like, that's
Yeah,
that's
that was terrifying. There is a question from Juan, good friend of the show. Do we know which broadcast teams for the Orange Bowl, Cotton Bowl? Who's got Fowler, Herbstreit? Who's got Tessitore, Palmer, or McDonough, McElroy? I'm thinking. I'm under the impression that McDonough, McElroy are above Tessitore and Palmer. I could be wrong there.
No, you're right.
Okay, and I love the McDonough McElroy.
They're really good
combo. I did not hear anything they said tonight, other than I tuned in to see what McElroy thought of the PI on Jack Kaiser, and when he said it was a good call, I'm like, okay, I guess I'll roll with Greg McElroy on this one. But yeah, but I don't know who gets what.
I would think Kirk will be on Ohio State.
Yeah, I would think Sue. Yeah, because it's better if you can lecture the Ohio State fan base in person than just from a couple 100 miles away. I would think, like, look, it's Ohio State, Notre Dame. That's a hell of a brand matchup.
Isaac,
Texas, Ohio State. I get that too.
Multiple people chiming in. I guess they said it on the broadcast. It will be McElroy and McDonough calling the game.
All right, I love it. I
like that. I mean, I love Sean McDonough. I'm a big McDonough fan, and I thought they did a good job today. I really did. I think, and I don't know how we've gotten into talking about the broadcast team, but because I think Greg McElroy. I've been pro Greg McElroy for a while, even though he's a Bama guy. He doesn't come off as like the SEC is holier than thou. By the way, this was
also a big McGrath fan too from Brendan McCarthy. So
yes. How about our friend? How about our friend Thomas Hammock chiming in on Twitter today?
No.
Dan Orlovsky said elite coaching at ND football, and he just put up a GIF, I think from Coming to America, where it was the barbershop scene where he said, he ain't lying.
Maybe we should get Thomas Hammock on the show.
I mean, I'll just say this. I was fortunate enough to interview him after their potato poll victory last Monday, almost as big as Notre Dame's win when I was doing sidelines. I was not aware of his viral moment where he talked about the most satisfying dump of his life. I would have tried to get that quote out of him, but Pete, I got him to like almost tear up, and I'm like, I'm going back in for another question, and I couldn't get there all the way, but he's great. No, he's great, and I think I would say if you ask Thomas Hammock, I think he is going to be a big Notre Dame fan come Thursday night. I mean, I was talking to the play-by-play broadcaster of NIU when I was in Boise, and he's like, beating Notre Dame, outside of just beating Notre Dame, they get brought up every day. Every day. Like, he's like, it's the best thing ever.
Yeah. No, he is outstanding. Yeah, maybe I think Fortuna knows him a little bit, so he may have.
You should get him on. He'd be great.
I mean, their season's over. He doesn't have anything to do.
Oh, yeah, he'd be great.
This is it's more of a comment than a question, but Jared Waugh looks like Father Jared Waugh, CSC,
man of the cloth. All right.
Yeah. It is so much fun to watch Marcus Freeman develop and grow as a head coach. Pure joy to witness in real time. And Father Waugh, if I'm pronouncing that right, you're spot on. I think everything, like, to me, this season to be a success, a few things had to happen, but the most important thing was Marcus Freeman had to convince us to stop calling him a first-time head coach, and now we will.
Yeah,
we're done with that.
You know what I'd be so curious about is like your colleagues. I think it's Mandel and Feldman, or is it just Mandel that put out the coaching rankings?
They both do one. Yes.
I'm so fascinated after this season because he is, did he get in the top 25?
No, because they do sort of, you have to be somewhere, I think. Wow, did he? I don't know. I mean, it wasn't the first year. I want to say that you had to be somewhere 3 seasons, but maybe it's 2 seasons. And who is farther down the list. And like, this is another thing I think I said on a previous show with Matt. Like, I feel like Notre Dame extended Marcus Freeman as if he had already beaten Indiana and Georgia based on the compensation terms of the deal, and now he's beaten Indiana and Georgia. But yeah, I feel like Marcus Freeman has grown in such a way as a head coach. I mean, now we're talking, is it 12 wins in a row now? I mean, 12 wins in a row for a guy that had never won more than 5 or 6 in a row before the season as a head coach. That
also covered 10 straight. Just pointing that out.
Yeah, you would point that out. That is real growth. I mean, the ability to like pull the right levers, to get performances from different parts of your locker room, to go for it when you need to be who you were in the biggest stage. I mean, I don't want to belabor Mr. Signetti here, but like he was who he was in the regular season. And then when he gets on the biggest stage, he's ever coached on in Notre Dame Stadium, he turns into like a Dollar Tree Kirk Ferentz. Like Marcus Freeman didn't let the moment get too big for him. And like, I don't know if we've done a show together, but like that Indiana game to me felt like Notre Dame, Alabama in 2020. And look, I get it. Alabama 2020 probably would have beaten Notre Dame tonight and beaten Georgia tonight. But in that game, like Notre Dame never threw a punch. It just felt like they were holding on for dear life from the beginning. And I think that was something Denbrock said to me after the game. He's like, look, we knew we couldn't back into this. There was no way we were just going to win this game by holding on. And they didn't, and they went for it. And that's, I think, a much more difficult thing to do for a veteran head coach or a first-time head coach than maybe we give them credit for sometimes.
The maturation of Freeman, and I said it to you when I jumped on, I think after the Army game before the USC game, and I know I joked that we need to make the t-shirts of violence, but like that moment when he said that to, I forget who the sideline reporter was, maybe it was Tappan, regardless.
Yeah.
And he goes, violence. And I'm like, dude, and I don't know if this is a new thing or maybe I'm just being more cognizant of it, Pete, but he's getting after these refs. Like, I don't know if you remember on the opening drive when, was it Schuler who got called for pass interference? No, Christian Gray got called for pass interference. And you saw Freeman over there just ripping the ref, just saying, let him play. And like, he's got this edge that I think we talked about it like a month ago. There's an edge for Freeman that was not there. And I don't know when it showed up, but that's what you see from elite coaches, where he can be great on the microphone and talking to people and have the smile and look the part with his, style. But that dude is a, M bleeper on the sideline, man. And it arrived this year.
Yeah, and it's a question or a note from Jake Real Estate is, as Marcus Freeman needs to get on the refs, Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, they're all on them. And I agree with it. But the thing that you have to do you can't do that if you're going 7-5.
Right.
Like if you want the refs to listen to you, you have to be like on your stuff as a head coach. When you're beating Georgia or you're going toe-to-toe to Georgia after you come into this game winning 11 in a row, like I think Marcus Freeman is going to get a lot more respect from the refs moving forward because, like, I mean, Dabo knows how to work the refs. Kirby knows how to work the refs. God knows Nick Saban knows how to work the refs. Like, but like they're all winners. Like those guys all won national titles. Marcus Freeman hasn't done that yet, but like he's won at a level now that I would think a ref would not look at him. Like this gets back to the first year head coach point. Like who's this guy?
Right.
Like get back on the sideline, dude. Like you haven't won anything. Like Marcus Freeman's won some stuff now. And I think that's probably going to get you a little bit more respect with those officials.
By the way, a lot of people asking if I should shave my head to fit in here. I did shave my head. I was shaved head for, I want to say not bicked, but like, buzzer shaved head for a good 10 years. Like,
really?
Yeah. I should show you, if you search Tim Murray Muhlenberg basketball, you'll see some shaved head dome there of me. Decided to finally grow it out like a couple of years ago.
Yeah, such luxury. This is from our good friend Juan, Jose Rodriguez. Per OptaStats, Notre Dame is the first team ever to beat AP-ranked opponents in 6 different months in the same season.
That's pretty wild.
A&M in August, Louisville in September, Navy in October, Army in November, IU in December, Georgia in January. Consistent against top teams.
And also worth noting, first 13-win season in school history.
That is true. I think that Marcus Freeman, if they beat Penn State, will match Brian Kelly's total bowl wins at Notre Dame in 3 seasons. I think you'd have to include Indiana as a bowl, which technically it's not.
Not to nitpick, but the Indiana win was the first big bowl win. Okay, I wanted to put that out there.
Okay, well, we're gonna agree to disagree. You're
beating Indiana was better than losing to Oklahoma State in the Fiesta Bowl without
that.
Kyle
I agree.
Hamilton and Kyron Williams.
It was much more significant. It was a more significant, satisfying performance for Notre Dame than beating Oregon State or.
Now hold on, that was fun because I was on the.
That's true. We were both there together.
I got to take a picture of you with Tony the Tiger.
Yeah, look how far we've come. That like the highlight of Notre Dame's last bowl win was me getting my picture taken by you with a human dressed as a tiger whose eyes, like I think I've changed that out as my Twitter avatar, but like that tiger did not want to be seen with me at all.
I think my Twitter avatar still remains me interviewing Marcus Freeman, and I think the header is me interviewing J.D. Bertrand after a Sun Bowl victory. How things have changed.
Yeah, tonight, I'm back in my hotel room. I picked up some confetti here from the field. Like I know it's like oddly not Notre Dame colors at all. It's like they got a 2-for-1 on Penn State, but still a cool thing to come away with tonight, and a heck of a lot more meaningful.
Who were
situation
MVPs tonight? Riley Leonard and
Xavier Watts.
Xavier Watts, okay,
yeah. Which,
by the way, Xavier Watts, when he went down, I was like, oh my god. And then you saw the replay. I was like, oh, he just lost his shoe. Okay,
yeah,
okay, we're good.
It was a very crafty injury to put your shoe back on. In youth basketball, they call timeout. In the Sugar Bowl, they don't. So you gotta create a timeout for yourself. It was the whole thing was an incredible scene post game. Confetti, streamers coming down, everyone's hugging each other. It's like you saw some old like Jalen Sneed's high school coach who was a longtime friend of Marcus Freeman was there. Like they were embracing.
First play of the game, man. Jalen Sneed just whoo.
He's figuring like, did it take longer than everyone wanted? Yes. But is he figuring it out? Also, yes. And
he is available to come back. I don't know. We're not getting into roster construction yet, but
yeah, he can come back. I think he actually may have 2 years. I could be wrong about that, but I know I believe he redshirted as a freshman. He's a junior now. So
you know what, Pete, and we talked about it so much in the start of it, but like just think about the people that were involved in this game and like how many different names that had an important say in this contest, whether it was, Jalen Sneed, first play of the game, kind of setting the tone, right?
Yeah.
Like, holy bleep, like they're coming out, man. They're getting after it. They've got speed. This isn't going to be a situation where they're going to be bullied. We mentioned Rod Hurd on the 4th down. Like so many different players made important plays in this game. And I think that's a testament once again to this squad. Like, yeah, Riley Leonard, I think rightfully so, is the MVP, but there were a lot of people that should be damn proud of the performance they had tonight. I mean, there's just so many different pieces that stepped up in this game.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It to me that was the biggest thing tonight was, when you talk about a program win, like sometimes we're fudging that a little bit.
Right.
It's just like, ooh, it was an important win, so we're going to call it a program win, or like we got a contribution from special teams, so we're going to call it a program win. Like this went from Marcus Freeman down to Leo Scheidler, like, and everyone in between felt like they did something positive to affect the outcome. Look, Kevin O'Grady from the chat mentioned, like, Donovan Heinisch. Like, where would they have been without him tonight?
During the
was
season when Howard Cross goes down,
Gabe Rubio. Like, haven't mentioned either of those guys tonight. That's where Notre Dame was going to get beat. If they got beat, they were going to get worn down in the trenches. But
Pete,
no,
Jeremiah Love had 6 carries for 19 yards, and Notre Dame beat Georgia by 13 points.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully he's healthy, and I know that we addressed it earlier, but hopefully he's healthy. But you would think that the most explosive player that Notre Dame's had in, I don't know, since Rocket Ishmael, Will Fuller, however you want to define. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild how, once again, to reiterate, how this team and the construction just all came together for this game.
Yeah, I mean, somebody mentioned, it's not a competition, but Bowen outplayed Kaiser, I guess. I mean, they both played well. Burnham, flash big, probably not somebody that we've mentioned for so far in this show tonight. Jeter, Corey Flynn says Jeter MVP, LOL. Like,
he was great.
Yeah. And, Jake Real Estate, the team develop an identity offensively, defensively, special teams, and they played to it. And Georgia's offense had no identity all year. I think that's one of the big, other than like everyone pulling their weight tonight, the other part was just that they stuck true to who they were all season. And that's not easy to do in a moment like this. So I give Notre Dame a ton of credit from Marcus Freeman to the entire coaching staff on down to the scholarship roster, the walk-ons. That all of it was massive. I mean, Chad Bowden, who's the general manager in terms of acquisitions in the transfer portal, hit all across the board tonight. So it was very impressive. Tim, we're at about 75 minutes. So any closing thoughts before I wrap this up?
No, man, this was it was from a personal standpoint, it was kind of weird because I went on the air as the game was ending. But I'm 37 years old. Over my shoulder is a panoramic picture from Notre Dame, Michigan in 1998 when Notre Dame beat the defending champions. That game was one of the most fun games that I've watched in my life. The way that they played to beat Georgia, a team that, yes, is not at the peak of its powers, but that's a Georgia team that beat Florida State 63-3 in a bowl game last year and won the national championship by 58 points 2 years ago. And Notre Dame just took it to them, and they were the better team. Now, statistically speaking, offensively, the numbers weren't great, but man, God, that was awesome. The defense was so badass. The special teams came through, and, we've been craving for it, and we started it. This is the biggest win since ... And people my age, we don't remember a national championship. I barely remember the Florida State game. Barely, like very few glimpses. Honestly, what I remember more is being with my family in Disney the next week and everyone telling us that Boston College beat Notre Dame. That's the memory I have. So
you're a true Notre Dame fan if that's it's your first Notre Dame memory.
Yeah, so this is the biggest win in quite some time, and hopefully it carries over to Penn State. But I think Thursday night, I plan on being there. It's going to be electric. I can't wait for it. And the fact that they're playing Penn State after beating an SEC team like Georgia, by the way, kind of getting a cool ass trophy that they haven't had in that trophy. I mean, when was the last Sugar Bowl win they had? 1992 against Florida?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Hey, cool trophy. You could maybe kick out the Sun Bowl trophy, but no, it was a hell of a night, man. I wish I was there, and it tells us where this program could be headed. And I think you said it earlier this week, or maybe last week on the podcast, which was like the 12-team playoff initially felt like, oh crap, Notre Dame's never going to win a national title. And now here they are. They've won 2 playoff games and are headed to the semis, and they're a favorite to win the semifinal matchup, Pete. I mean, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, after being a favorite to beat Georgia, the SEC champion. Like, how wild is that? It's so we'll wrap it up there. Like, look, I've been on this beat since 2001. I had a full head of hair back then. Notre Dame, like its glory days, were not that far removed. When I was working with Tim Priester and the late great Lou Emoji, and man, I've never covered the game that I covered tonight before, and I've been doing this for 24 seasons, and to be able to like write about Notre Dame winning the big one and be there to watch it in New Orleans against Georgia, who was like, Alabama 2.0, was an incredible experience. And like, it's to be able to be here and like document that and see what it sounded like, but it felt like, I didn't get any confetti in my mouth, so I couldn't tell you what it tasted like, but it was an incredible experience. And now Notre Dame's moving on to the Orange Bowl against Penn State, thanks to tonight's 23-10 win over Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Notre Dame is 13-1, which probably
great wins, man.
Notre Dame is 13-1.
Think about this for a moment. And I know it gets brought up all the time. Notre Dame on September 7th lost to Northern Illinois, a team that would go, 4-4 in the MAC.
Yeah.
And they're headed to the semifinals after beating the crap out of Georgia. Like, what world are we in? And lastly, I'll say this, like, if this was last year and Notre Dame beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, but it wasn't a playoff game, immediately it would have been, they didn't care. It was this bowl. This is a playoff game, and they took it to Georgia, a team that won the SEC, a team that beat Texas not once, but twice. Yes, Carson Beck wasn't playing, but Notre Dame had injuries too, and they won this game by 13 points over Georgia, man. This is pretty awesome. And hopefully I'll see a lot of you if I get my things in order down in Miami, because I'm going to be fired up, man. I can't wait to get down there.
I would love to see it. We will be back with, I'm sure, multiple independents before before kickoff of the Orange Bowl for sure. Hopefully we'll get Matt back on board. With colleague at The Athletic, Audrey Snyder, who's a beat writer for Penn State. Probably have her on as well. Apparently,
Ty Hildebrand. By the way, what is Ty Hildebrand going to do?
Ooh, yeah, former guest of The Athletic, a regular occurring guest.
Penn State alum, Notre Dame fan. Like,
and then we got to get Thomas Hammock on as well. So
That's
plenty
true.
of.
You got a lot of work there, Pete.
Man, I thought I was going to go out for a drink here, but I'm not. I think I got to get to booking. So, Tim, thanks for coming on the show. This was probably the easiest podcast either of us will ever do in our lives. We probably could have done another hour and a half, but we'll leave it there. After Notre Dame's 23-10 win over Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, Irish are moving on in the college football playoff to face Penn State on January 9th in South Florida. So until then, he's Tim. I'm Pete. Thanks for being with us on this latest episode of The Independent.